As always, the opinions expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of DKI APCSS, the U.S. Department of Defense, or the U.S. government.
In Myanmar history, the Burma majority and the ethnic groups, right, they have never fought side by side together.
Okay.
In fact, some cases they have fought on the opposite side. Right? This is the first time they're fighting side by side. And they knew that they have to do it themselves. There's nobody's going to come and help them. So it forced them to cooperate.
From the Daniel K. Inouye Asia-Pacific Center for Security Studies in Honolulu, Hawaii, welcome to Episode 8 of the Security Nexus webinar, titled Myanmar, 3 Years of Conflict, What's Next? I'm your host, James Minnick, Colonel United States Army retired, and Professor at DKI APCSS. Today is February 12th, and we're pleased to have Professor Miemie Winn Byrd, a distinguished authority on Myanmar's security and political landscape, as our guest. Since gaining independence from Great Britain in 1948, Myanmar has been embroiled in continuous conflict characterized by deep-seated ethnic, political, and ideological divisions. This long-standing turmoil has led the nation to alternate between military governance and brief attempts at civilian rule. Initially, the post-independence period was marked by a parliamentary democracy. This was disrupted by a military coup in 1962, which initiated 5 decades of authoritarian military control. In recent years, Myanmar appeared to be on a path to democracy, with the election of Aung San Suu Kyi and her party, the National League for Democracy. However, this journey was abruptly halted when the military in February 2021 ousted the popularly elected government, leading to widespread international condemnation and sparking the Spring Revolution. This revolution, characterized by widespread civil disobedience and protests, escalated into armed conflict due to the military's severe crackdown on peaceful demonstrations. Now in its 3rd year of intensified conflict, Myanmar faces severe challenges. The military's oppressive measures against dissenters have precipitated a humanitarian crisis with numerous reports of human rights abuses, potential war crimes, and an increasing number of displaced persons. The international community is in a quandary over how to respond effectively, striving to balance the provision of humanitarian aid with the intricacies of diplomatic and economic sanctions. The crisis in Myanmar transcends local borders, having significant implications for regional stability and strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific. The involvement of neighboring countries and global powers in the crisis introduces additional complexity to an already convoluted geopolitical scenario. In today's episode, we look forward to discussing the ongoing conflict in Myanmar with Dr. Miemie Winn Byrd, the possibilities for a democratic resolution, and the broader consequences for regional and international security. Miemie, welcome to the Security Nexus webinar.
Thank you. Aloha. Thank you for having me.
We're super glad to have you here. You are a person in high demand. I know you are. I wonder if you might start by giving us some of your personal background. Talking to us about your connection with Myanmar and how it's helped shape your perspectives in your journey to becoming this renowned expert in Myanmar's political issues.
Well, I'm not sure I'm renowned, but
Respect.
Yes, well, I have a personal connection to Myanmar because I was born in Myanmar and I grew up until 8th grade in Myanmar, and then my family immigrated to the United States. So from that point on, I grew up in the United States. But as a child, always listening to adult conversation at dinner or other gatherings, and it always. I remember them talking about the China.
Yes.
How threatened by China imminent invasion of Myanmar, or the the communist insurgency. So, it's always in the back of my mind, and it's always been a part of my makeup as a result. So when I when I came to the United States, and then I went to college, and I got involved with the Army ROTC, that's always been in the back of my mind. And then, in recent years, I've been more involved, and especially in the transition democracy, we were trying to reform and trying to attempt to reform the military into more the professionalized.
I want to hold you there. We'll back you up a minute. I think you said something about serving in the United States Army. As I recall, you retired as a lieutenant colonel?
Yes, U.S. Army Civil Affairs.
And so I suspect during that period, perhaps you had reason to travel with the military to Myanmar?
Yes. There are many exercises where sometimes the scenario took place in Myanmar, and I was always called upon to advise or play the role as a Burmese or whatever, but because I had the language capability and the overall connection to Myanmar, and there's not too many people inside U.S. military at the time,
or even now. I think you're one of the few Burmese professionals I've had the privilege of working with over the years, and I know in my 8 years here, you've been heavily involved, not just here at the center, but throughout the command, and you're constantly being called upon to be able to give insight into these issues. And so then you spoke about some of the work you did here, and I remember some of those years when we were more engaged with Myanmar, how deeply engaged you were. Maybe you might talk just a little bit about that experience as well.
Well, that experience informed a lot of insight that I have today, because we were trying to help transform, but that process was abruptly, stopped by the coup. Yeah. So yes, today insight is from the many years of having interaction with the military, and then as I was spending a lot of time inside Myanmar. So yes, it has informed my work today.
Well, thank you for sharing some of that personal story with us as well. Maybe we might transition just a little bit and talk a little bit about the current conflict dynamics going on right now. So the insurgency has gained, it's at a marked critical phase right now, and it highlights, I think, the pro-democracy's momentum, but a worsening humanitarian crisis because of the conflict going on. So we might ask ourselves, what are the implications for Myanmar's stability and regional politics?
Right. Well, I want everybody to know that instability was instigated
of course,
by the Myanmar military.
That's right.
Right. It started with the coup, and it didn't stop at the coup. It's tried to, violently crack down the peaceful protester. So people felt like they don't have any other choice but to, protect themselves. So it's more of a defensive, action for the people in the resistance side. So I want people to be clear that is the military instigated that current instability. But, as you know, in this type of conflict, the people are the power, not so much firepower. Myanmar military has so much more firepower, 100 times more than the people, but they have less than 10% of people supporting them. The data show that over 90% after 3 years of conflict still reject the military.
Why would that be, you think?
Because I think they got the strategy all wrong from the beginning, right? This was all about political problem. Right?
This is exactly right.
Yeah, they try to use the military to solve the political issue. And it's all about hearts and mind, capturing people's hearts and mind. And you bomb the houses and the towns, and then you brutally crack down people. You're not going to win hearts and mind, right? And again, Machiavelli. So the only thing they have in their arsenal per se is fear. Why are they doing this? They want to submit people into submission by fear, right? Using fear. But as you know, Machiavelli always warned that overuse of fear for prince. Right? It can turn into anger.
That's right.
And that's what has happened.
That's right. So there is not perhaps a military solution to the junta being able to resolve the issue as they would like to, and yet so as they continue to use this military power, which is so much stronger than even what the resistance can bring together, they continue, as you say, to separate divide the people from them, and we spoke earlier about how this is having significant ramifications into defections, and today, I guess maybe this weekend, we were talking about how they've instituted the draft, right?
Yeah, nationwide.
Yes. Maybe you elaborate a little bit on that.
Yes, well, that also an indicator of them losing, not having enough people anymore. Because, like you said earlier, they have seen the unprecedented level of defection. Defection at the unit level, the whole unit defecting, like the biggest one, 6,500, person troop, unit that defected, and you have like a battalion defecting all the time, right? And then they have every time they have a ground skirmishes, they have more killed in action than the opposition side, despite they have the higher, the firepower, right? And then the surrender. And lately, has been the whole unit surrendering. Even though they still have firepower, they're surrendering because they don't have the will to fight anymore. Why? Because they don't have the support of the people. They have lost the support of the people, right? And many of the military, they signed up to protect the nation, protect the country, protect the people. But what they see was their mission was to destroy the country, destroy the people. Kill the citizens. So, they just don't have the will to fight. And then 3 years of also fighting, right? They have battle fatigue.
Yeah.
They're battle fatigue.
Let's go ahead and transition and talk about the political and social implications. So with Yangon's deceptive calm amidst a raging national conflict, we might ask ourselves, how can the insurgency address what appears to be a fragmentation and then foster post-conflict cooperation?
Well, it's like appearance of normalcy in these major cities, but underlying, right? There's always fear and uncertainty for people, and the economy has declined. It has taken a spike, so people are struggling to live, right? Because of the international sanction and the mismanagement of the military, of the economy, right? I mean, the both economy and the social cohesiveness is dissipated, right? It is fractured. So, as for the fracturing, military has always deploy the strategy of divide and conquer.
That's right.
On purpose. That's right. On purpose between different ethnic groups, right? So by removing the military, you don't have that entity anymore, right? But also, now that military has become the common enemy and common goal, it has united or pull everybody together.
That's right.
Against the one enemy and toward a one goal. They all have a goal of restoring democracy, federal democracy, and removing the military from politics forever.
Now there's going to have to be something beyond that to hold the country together in if in fact the junta is defeated. And so while that's unifying them now, what will unify them after the junta is defeated?
Right. In Myanmar history, the Burma majority and the ethnic groups, right, they have never fought side by side together.
Okay.
In fact, some cases they have fought on the opposite side, right? This is the first time they're fighting side by side. Right? And they knew that they have to do it themselves. There's nobody's going to come and help them. So it forced them to cooperate. And I say unifying, to a degree they are unifying, but I think unity is a very high bar.
It is.
But I think they can cooperate. And the habits of cooperation that they are developing,
Right.
will go a long way in post-conflict as they develop federal democracy or some type of a collective governance together.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the international response strategy to what's going on. So in the face of Myanmar's escalating conflict and its humanitarian needs, how can the international community balance humanitarian aid with the support for this democratic movement to effectively address the crisis and assist Myanmar's return to democratic governance? What can be done?
Right. The humanitarian assistance is really, really needed
Yes.
in Myanmar. And a lot of the international community feel like they have to work with the military to deliver the
Okay.
international aid. But in fact, what our data is showing is that less than half the country is under the control of military. And the area that are needing the most humanitarian assistance is they're under the control of either the PDF NUG and the Ethnic Armed Organization, EAOs. So if you really are serious about wanting to deliver international aid, right, you have to work through those organizations. You can't work through the military.
Would you give a proposal or recommendation on how that would be done?
Right. So it's important is the neighboring country,
Okay.
right? Because you have to physically get the aid in.
That's right.
So that from the working with the neighboring country like Thailand, India, Bangladesh, and even China, to get the aid in from that part, because those border areas are now all under the control of the Ethnic Armed Organization. It is no longer the control of the military junta. So really, I mean, if the international community work with the military, they're more likely to direct the aid to where they control, but those are not the area that need the aid most.
That's right.
What they're doing is they're bombing the countryside, all the the periphery.
I wonder if you're familiar with any examples of success yet in that model of distributing humanitarian aid from the borders, or is that just something we need to approach now? Or maybe there are some examples of success, I don't know.
Yeah, they are. And especially it has to do with the women's group.
Okay.
The women's group are the most active group of people that are delivering aid through their network from the border area into the needed areas. And so they have a huge network, and I think that they can do more. They have more capacity if you were able to help them, but they just have short on resources to get it in there. So working with those type of youth groups, the women group have been very active in delivering, but they just need more resources.
So we'll just loiter here just a minute more. So there are quite a few different ethnic armed organizations that are out there, different groups. Are they consolidated? Any under a single head that can be worked with? Is the National Unity Government an agency to work with? Is it in fact more local, that on the ground working with different and separate ethnic organizations?
Yeah, because right now each of the ethnic organization control their territories, their territory. So understanding those and then working with them will be the most effective way. But they are cooperating, right, together. There's no one single command and control like we would normally think of, but actually it is different people, but they're coming into a collective and coordinating together. So, you may hear terms like K3C. There's a Kachin, Karen, Karani, and Chin.
Yes.
They cooperate. They're like, and then you have a Three Brotherhood, right? That's up in the north. So they have their own pocket, but overall also because of the common goal, they're able to cooperate together. And that's why if they didn't cooperate, they wouldn't have been able to achieve the level of success they have achieved so far.
Oh, I agree with you. 3 years is demonstrative on how long they've been able to put up a significant resistance.
Yes.
Those insights are quite interesting. Thank you. I wonder if we might transition a little bit our discussion. Let's talk about the U.S. involvement and its policy. So Burma Act 2022, it underscores U.S.'s commitment to Myanmar's democracy and human rights. I think that's well known. But its impact is curtailed by a focus on humanitarian aid amidst fragmented resistance that we've been speaking about. And so maybe it's more aspirational than where we're at, but I might ask you then, how might the U.S. refine its approach to bolster democracy and unify resistant efforts that are going on in Myanmar?
Well, there's a Burma Act of 2022 and
Yep.
the Burma Act of 2023. And yes, I think that the Burma Act of 2023 authorized all the necessary element needed to bring this conflict to to restore democracy. Like you said, however, it's aspirational at this moment, and that it needs the more resources behind it. But even if there are no resources, one of the most valuable thing that Burma Act has provided was the recognition of EAOs, ethnic armed organization. They have never been recognized internationally. Right? So what make that is to bring their level up.
Yes.
So when they're negotiating with the the Burma organization, right, and UG, and they have a lot more, they're at the same level. So that negotiation will be much more healthier negotiation than, so I think that if even nothing come of it, that alone plays give a lot of support to, the ethnic group and overall healthy, negotiation position.
So let me add a little more clarity. You're right. The Burma Act of 2022 was then folded into the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2023. It folded it in there, and it came forward with the language to do the things you're speaking about. I don't know that the language was as it was they may provide opposed to like they shall provide, providing much more clear guidance or much more affirmative action that must be taken. I think the aid to date has mostly been implemented by the Department of State, USAID, and mostly then along the areas of humanitarian assistance. Needed, as you indicated, rightly so. But if there's going to be effort that moves along the collaboration, the cooperation, is there not more that could be done? Command and control, communications. What other things might you see that this type of aid could assist in if we were going to make further movement in not just humanitarian assistance, but the democratic advancements amongst these resistance groups?
Right. The Act authorized non-lethal aid.
It does.
To PDFs and to ethnic armed organizations, EAOs. So under that umbrella, there are many things that the U.S. can offer. Like you said, communication is, line of communication is really critical.
Yes.
Because that is needed for, to cooperate with one another, but also to deliver humanitarian aid, right? And then also to warn the people for civilian protection. When they see the plane started to fly, where depending on where they're going, start to evacuate people. So if that alone, that assistance alone can go a long way. Because as you can see, the lethal aid is not necessary because people have been able to beat down the military with what they have, right? But for so that's why they have been able to get to, I call it tipping point.
Okay.
The resistance has arrived to the tipping point. But tipping point to end point is that little extra, right? Non-lethal aid, things like the communication equipment, communication platforms can be provided that can go faster. It can go faster.
And so I don't think there's the country currently has a Burma coordinator.
Right. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, and so maybe that might be some type of assistance. We spoke earlier about a caucus.
Yes, Burma
Maybe you might talk
Caucus.
just a little bit more about this as a needed effort. Go ahead.
Right. Burma Caucus was instituted in U.S. Congress at the beginning of this month, and it has several objectives, and one of them was to appoint a Burma focus coordinator. So that they can focus on it. But because of this is going to be a formal caucus,
Yes.
It will be able to focus more on Burma issue and be able to advocate and for the resources for Burma Act with the administration and with the Congress. So it is a I think very positive development. Because our government is also very big, so it takes a while. But 3 years and being able to do this is amazing, I think, success. I mean, I think progress, I can say. And I want to give the credit to a lot of the Burmese, Myanmar, and ethnic minority diaspora. Especially, I want to call out Chin community. Chin community is a very tiny, the Chin ethnic group is a very small group of people, but they have come together, and they've been able to push this effort. But of course, together with other Myanmar American community and friends. So what I want to say is that when they cooperate, right, all these things that are impossible, seemingly impossible, become possible.
Yes.
So, as to pass an act and stuff, that is not an easy feat in U.S. Congress, and especially a country like Myanmar, which is doesn't appear to be important or the high profile. But I want to say that, it is a very important geostrategically if you look at the map.
Well, let's just go there then. Let's talk about its importance and its neighbors that compete in this area. So as we turn to China and Russia's role in Myanmar, considering that China's economic influence and Russia's military support in Myanmar, how do these nations shape Myanmar's political landscape? And then what about the impact that they have within regional stability? And then we might also include, what about the broader geopolitical implications of these actors?
Right. Well, for China, Myanmar is very essential.
Okay.
It must have it to get to the Indian Ocean, right? Myanmar, having unfettered access through Myanmar to the Bay of Bengal, to the Indian Ocean, it really solved the Malacca dilemma. It's always in Malacca because in Malacca Strait is where 80% of their oil go through right now. By having the pipeline from the western coast of Myanmar all the way into Yunnan, that kind of provide the strategic alternative. So they've always looked at it that way. And also historically, any country that want to play large or dominate Asia, they always needed Myanmar because of the geographical location, right? So, so that's why British had Myanmar, and then Japanese during World War II wanted to take control of Myanmar because it's really geostrategically very important. So similarly today for China, it's very, very important, Myanmar. So, but I think that it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game for China. I think that China will need to rethink how it's going to work with Myanmar. Because they think, when the Myanmar was under Aung San Suu Kyi administration, they came close to them. And then now military, they are now working with military, thinking that Myanmar military is too big to fail. But in fact, they're not understanding is that as long as the Myanmar is dealing with the military junta, it will never be stable or peaceful. And that put all of their investments in their project at risk, right? So understand, and then also there's always, like I was telling you earlier, when I was younger, right? We think of China as a threat.
Yes.
And that sentiment is all throughout the people, even today. So this is, I think, big opportunity for China to change that mindset by coming to the aid of the people. Because over 90% of the people reject the military. And if you're working with someone that people rejected and hate, then you're going to continue to play into the historical negative view against China. So for the long term, for China, by supporting the people and helping the people, what people desire, would go a long way. And then it will stabilize the country, and then then they can do investment in business.
So do you think we'll see more of that? So we spoke about, particularly after last year, October 27th, the 1027 operation, where great success by the resistance forces, and as you noted, the Tatmadaw, the military junta, is much more consolidated in the center or in the populated areas. And so with the resistance forces operating maybe in some degrees unfettered along the borders and with China, are they in fact going to, do you see them operating more with the border resistance elements, the ethnic organizations, and having that type of connection that you spoke about, or is that not going to occur? What do you think?
Well, specifically with the northern armed groups,
yes,
right? The Three Brotherhood, right? Because they're in the northern area, they get a lot of pressure from China to work with the military, to sit down with the military. But what happened was that military is very much involved in these cyber scam centers,
Yes.
right? And they're really having problem for China. Again, back to what I'm saying, as long as military junta is there in Naypyidaw, that type of instability will always occur because they're no longer the professional military organization. They are a criminal gang now,
Okay.
right? And from the highest to the lowest involved in these cyber scam development and aiding and abetting and profiting from these cyber scam centers. So then China tried to tell the military junta to do something about it because they're having problem on their side, and they didn't do anything.
And so they're starting to...
Right. So then the Three Brotherhood took care of it. Yeah. So that's why China stepped back from pushing them to negotiate and sit down with the military. They pull back. Right, and that's why the Three Brotherhood came into the fold, because up to that point, at 1027, they're having to deal with that pressure of China, telling them to don't fight the military, sit down and negotiate with them.
I mentioned Russia and its engagement, particularly with military cooperation, and without a doubt there'll be some arms transfers and stuff, but maybe you might comment a little bit about their malign influence and what can be done, you might recommend.
Right. One of the reasons the military has always deal with Russia is that they don't want to buy equipment from China because they are afraid China will know exactly what they have, right? And for Russia, it's kind of a lucrative market for their old stuff.
Yeah.
They sell old equipment that they don't use anymore, right? For example, some of the planes are such a guzzlers that the Myanmar military, they don't fly it too often because it's eat up a lot of gas, jet fuel. So, that's how they see it. But plus, on top of it, of course, anything that's democracy, they're allergic, so they will just spoiler. It's much more a spoiler. But also, this is a place where I think China and Russia can be at odd because Myanmar is using them to balance each other. Right? So, but like I said, Russia is not going to give their equipment away free.
No.
And Myanmar military is running out of dollars,
Okay.
is running out of resources because, they have a lot of businesses left. Because it's, the
flight of capital.
Yeah, flight of capital, and so economy taking a nosedive. So, they're running out of revenue and running out of dollars because of a lot of this sanction as well. And then also their mismanagement. of the economy. So, eventually Russia's not going to provide them with free equipment.
Yeah.
They can't buy it.
As we peel this back, it's alarming the amount of the degradation of the Myanmar, the society, the government, the structure of it all. You spoke about the total corruption of the military. The military is going to have to be rebuilt eventually, so that it's functioning. I mean, they're going to have to take perhaps existing institutions and have to figure out how to create functioning institutions after years of decay. It'll be a tremendous effort that the international community will clearly be called upon to assist, I would assume.
Yes, yeah, because the military is endemic corruption. As you know, military, if you are corrupt, you are not an effective fighting force, right? For example, their corruption in such a way that when they have a kill in actions, for example, 10 kill in action, they don't report all 10 kill in action. They report 2.
Right.
So at given moment in Naypyidaw, they have no idea how many. Yeah, right. So how can you be a effective fighting? Everything that they do is all corrupted.
That's right.
So, whatever you do, you can't reach your objective as a result.
You're constantly exploiting money or from the locals. You're constantly siphoning off funds from the government, things that come in. You may black market things like fuel. I mean, there's so many ways to...
fuel, exactly, like the jet fuel, right? Yeah. They never put a full tank in there. They always siphon off and sell it and off. That's how the maintenance crew and the pilots, do that all the time, right? And then, like, for example, the ration given for the troops, they don't get it. Like, I think you see the latest thing has been in India, right? A group of troops ended up on the India side. So India said they're going to send them back to Myanmar. So they're waiting for a ride on the plain tarmac. And you see their backpacks are bamboo baskets.
Yes.
And they have flip-flops.
Yeah.
Right? And that's
example of the modern
Myanmar mighty military, supposedly, right? But that's the type of fighting force. So the same thing with they're conscripting, right?
Yeah.
This draft, they can't even provide well for the people that they already have. How are they going to provide that to the new recruits?
That's right.
Right? And then what's going to happen is, because it's so corrupt, it's going to become money-making endeavor for people on the front line that are recruiters. Because people they will take the bribe and then let them go.
Oh, yes.
So it will end up with all the young people that can't afford it.
That's right.
Right? But it will further fuel this corruption machine.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why they're not going to get what they wanted. They're not going to get more force. But even then, like, if you get the fighting force, right, that is like conscripted and like you have to grab them, they're not going to be a effective fighting force. They don't have the will.
They won't have the will and
motivation.
And with every action the junta takes, they continue to lessen the will of the people and create more resistance.
Right, because people, I just heard that I will not give my life to the military. If I have to die, they say, I'd rather die fighting against the military. So now they have, like, the recruiting on the resistance side just went up.
Oh, that's encouraging.
So they don't have very much left of support, right, than the military junta side. But now it's, I think this could be a fatal mistake for them.
We will soon see how this plays out as it's just been implemented. Let's turn our attention, talk about women and minority impact of the conflict. So Myanmar's conflict has intensified the violence against women and the minorities, highlighting the need for international action. So I'll ask you, how can the international community address and support the victims in gender-based violence in Myanmar? What can be done?
I want to talk a little about minority, right? The plight of the minority. They have always suffered at the hand of the Myanmar military.
Yes.
But the majority never understood that or have the compassion for that, because they didn't think it's possible, right? But after the coup, they realized what military has done and what the ethnic group has been saying is true, because they personally start to see that. So this coup has transformed people thinking, and that goes into like having more cooperation with the ethnic group, easier, right? So that plays into that. And then also women. The women in the period of democracy of last 10 years, they have gained a lot of rights, and also they have, their eyes are open.
Yes.
And they got a lot of opportunity. If Myanmar go back to patriarchal military authoritarianism, they know they're the group they were more likely to lose. So they are absolutely in the front line fighting for democracy, because democracy is better for the women.
I remember in early pictures, the women demonstrating wearing their formal dresses. Do you recall that from the media?
Yes. So because women come into this resistance, they bring a lot of creativity. A lot of creativity, right? So and then they're the primary people that really understand the non-lethal way to resist.
Yes.
And they're the one that keep people together. They're the glue. They're the glue of the society in most, all the human society. And the same thing, they're the glue in this particular fight as
And there's
well.
a majority of them are of the ethnic armed groups. A significant number are women, and in the leadership as well, are they not?
Well, in the leadership, there's still room to improve, but the participation across the board, not just the ethnic, but also in all the PDF area, and also overall global. If you just look at the entire resistance movement, not only the inside the country but outside the country, the data show that 65% is women.
65%. That's significant.
And they bring the smart power into the fight. And back to it's not about firepower, it's about people power and smart power. And then women provided that needed mass, right?
Yeah.
And then plus the smart power that they bring.
I'm glad you shared that with us. I wonder if we go back, are there things that the international community might do, though, regarding the sexual and gender-based violence that is endemic going on in the country? Is there actions that can be taken, do you think?
Well, I think that there are IIMM or something like that. There are groups already gathering all the evidence. And then of course the trauma care, right? The evidence and trauma care are really needed. So if we can provide the resources behind it. There are people individually doing it. Even this young woman in Hawaii, she's a counselor, and she's been trying to do herself. But we need more, because there are millions of people that are victimized. So yes, in that area also international. And again, it's a non-lethal support.
Yes.
It's the humanitarian aid.
Yeah.
So if we can, that can go a long way.
Let's take a futuristic look now and ask you to put on your that hat, and let's look about the outlook for 2024, what the future might bring us. So Myanmar's deadlock between the junta and the resistance forces, and it underlines this precarious balance. So what implications does either a stalemate or a power shift in 2024 hold for Myanmar towards its peace and democracy? Which way are we going to go?
Yeah, there's a possibility of shifting the power. And when that happens, I think the international community need to be ready. So that's why I've been saying the international community need to start now.
Okay.
Because that's a highly possible. Because as you can see how the Myanmar military is on the downward spiral, right? So, and when that happened, I think that's cooperation, right? Trying to draw on that foundation of habits of cooperation is really, really important. And they're providing platforms where they can come together to negotiate, right? Not one day of workshop.
Yes.
It's going to have to be series, because you have a lot of complexity there. But because it's complex, you can't say it's not doable.
Right.
It's doable. but they just need the opportunity and resources devoted to it.
And I think now perhaps is the time that it needs to start working on it, not after a power shift occurs and say, boy, we ought to do something now, as momentum will be lost if you wait until then, right?
Right.
And a loss of momentum could alter the dynamics of this fight between the powers,
Right.
between the sides.
Because right now, like I said, less than half the countries under the military control. So all the other areas are under the control of various ethnic groups
right.
and various NUG and PDFs. So we can start helping them with local governance.
That's right.
Right? So they have to practice principle of democracy in their area, and which will make them prepare for the overall, federal, state, or confederacy, whatever they wanted to come up with, right? But if they don't have their area, under the democratic principle, then it'll be hard for them to ask for
It will, won't it?
at the national level. Yeah.
So I share some of your optimism that maybe a power shift could occur, but equally we could find ourselves in a bit of a stalemate, kind of where we're at right now,
Right.
status quo, this time next year. And if we find ourselves continually in this quagmire, what do we do?
Right.
What can be done? How do we help?
Again, that quagmire is possible if people don't cooperate, right? There's resistant forces, and people have to work together to move it forward. So yes, there's a possibility they are unable to come together, they are unable to cooperate better to get to the end point. Right? They have reached the tipping point with, so far, their level of cooperation, but more cooperation is needed to the end point. So it will just continue this level of the conflict. The conflict will prolong. And also, for the international community, appeasing the military is just making that,
Prolonged.
prolong the fight and prolong the suffering. Right? So that's why military is absolutely illegitimate, and they're not in control of the country anymore. So there's no need to appease them.
Yes. Let's go now into a discussion about policymakers and stakeholder strategy. So in supporting Myanmar's divided resistance, what strategy should policymakers and stakeholders adopt to enhance the group's cooperation and effectiveness?
Right. Well, I think the Burma Act provided a kind of like a good framework.
Okay.
So if you are able to fully implement what is authorized in the Burma Act, and the international community should look at the Burma Act framework, and then, within that framework, if they can provide non-lethal aid and humanitarian aid, really, it can get to the end point faster.
Well, so that we've talked a bit about aid, and I think you're right. I think there's, while we have authorizations, we need appropriations. But another area we might talk about is diplomatic engagement and recognition. There is not really much in the way of recognition with regards to the national unity government, or even perhaps the ethnic organizations, but maybe you can expound on what you're seeing there with that.
Well, diplomatic support side, right? I think that diplomatic support to the NUG government and the ethnic group on this, creating this the humanitarian corridor.
Yes.
By helping them with negotiate with the neighboring countries,
Yes.
it could go a long way. So it's not about the broader. Broader sanction has worked well. It has really squeezed
It's
the
one
military.
tool.
Yeah, one tool. It squeezed the military of a lot of the, the
Needed resources.
Yeah. So I think that the real on the ground right now is the neighboring country and working with them, and then also working with the ASEAN. ASEAN, it's stuck. So helping ASEAN reframe it and understand that Myanmar issue is not just an internal issue, it has a larger implication, wider security implication for the neighbors
Yes.
and the region, is also needed. So those are the type of support and assistance that they can give.
Yeah, so if the problem is multifaceted, it's more than just a single nail that this hammer of the sanctions will address effectively. Even if you add onto that the humanitarian assistance, it's just still another tool. This is a complex problem that requires a lot of various tools to adequately maybe address the types of problems we're seeing, to be able to bring this beyond something that doesn't see us in another year in the same place we're at.
Right. Well, when I look at the winning revolution of the history, right, what we keep on seeing is a common element keep on appearing. We call it DIP, D-I-P, defection,
Yes.
international pressure, and people's support. Right? It's not about firepower. Right?
No, it seldom is in this type of counterinsurgency. It's not about employing or insurgency or counterinsurgency. It's not about the firepower. It's about
People power.
people power.
And smart power. Smart power, right? You outsmart your enemy, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just basic good strategy. Good strategy is not about firepower. Good strategy is about outsmart the enemy, right? Sun Tzu always said.
Yeah. Well, in the time that we have remaining, let's turn to our audience's questions as we wrap up, yes? So we had a large group of those who registered, and we've organized their thoughts into key topics for comprehensive overview, and we've pulled several together here. And so the first one we'll talk about is the China-Myanmar economic corridor. You spoke a little bit about that when you spoke about China, but given the potential risks to its investments in Myanmar, such as the Rakhine Deep seaport and the China-Myanmar economic corridor, what strategies might China pursue to safeguard its interests?
Right. If China can get beyond the ideological blindness, right, because China it's allergic to democracy in its neighborhood. But the thing is, that is the one that is the most stable form for Myanmar. So when Myanmar was under the democratic system, it was, it prospered as well, right? And then also, second is, if China can look at win-win mindset, instead of win-lose, right? Take winner take all type of attitude, and that type of attitude bring about that, Myanmar people negative view of China, right? So this is an opportunity. It can be seen as opportunity for China, and then they can also create opportunity for the people instead of utilizing these corrupted officials and leveraging the corruption. At the end, in the long term, it doesn't help them. The prosperous Myanmar, stable Myanmar, peaceful Myanmar is the most, they can do a lot of business with Myanmar. Myanmar is a big country and full of resources, right? And then it should be fair. If they practice fair business practices, and it can go a long way, right? So it's time for China to kind of rethink and not utilize and leverage these corruption in Myanmar.
So
that add more negative view of them.
Yeah, and so China is clearly advancing those major projects in Myanmar. Do you think there's a risk of that these projects are at risk for security reasons or not? Do you think?
Sure, because they're bombing all the time. It could accidentally bomb this stuff. And then they had, they can continue, but in the many places they had to stop, right? But if Myanmar was all peaceful and stable, they can continue to conduct business.
Your larger point, if they would help advance the peaceful transition to this democratic resistance, then their projects would move ahead easier. Is your
right.
Point,
they had a very good relationship with the Aung San Suu Kyi government, and they were progressing, but now you have a harder time. Yeah.
No, I think your points are well taken. Let's transition to the next question. So this one regarding the India-Myanmar relations. And so how does the conflict's extension into northeast India affect its regional security, and what measures should India and the neighboring countries take to mitigate these concerns?
Again, I think that India has a misunderstanding of Myanmar. It has bought into Myanmar military juntas, many years of propaganda. They're too big to fail. They're the one that keep the country together. They're the one provider of stability, right? And they believe that. And so that's why they're taking but they are not understanding that they, as in India, officials are not understanding that Myanmar military control very little now.
Yeah.
So they can be in the same boat as China if they continue with this type of strategy. So it's really time for India to wake up, and being the largest democracy in Asia, it should live up to its democratic principles.
And so you're thinking there's much more that they could do.
Oh, yes. Because they border.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
And so, just allowing the corridor, the humanitarian assistance corridor, would be very, very helpful to the Myanmar people.
I think they're in the process of at least aspirationally putting up a fence between the two countries, are they not?
To keep the instability out, but as we know, fence never or wall never really help
solve the problem.
Solve the problem, right?
Let's turn to Myanmar's elections. So, considering the extension of emergency rule, which I think began at the beginning of this year, and
not surprising.
Not surprising. And the continuing conflict, what are the prospects for elections under Min Aung Hlaing's leadership?
Yeah, if that is done under his leadership, it will not be free and fair. And it will not be countrywide either, right? Because they only have less than half the country under control. So whatever their vote is not going to be representative of the desire of the entire country. So really, it is not a viable solution. And people won't buy that. People won't buy that. Yeah, so it's not a viable solution. Or exit strategy.
Yeah, probably not, but it would seem to me, if I was, it is the direction that the junta must recognize it must go toward. If it is going to retain some type of authority and power, it's going to find it through a direction of even through a facade, as you're indicating, but elections of some sort have got to be in the future. But I guess to your larger point, they just won't be viewed favorably.
Yeah, right.
I watched this in Korea. I spent going on 45 years now of my professional career engaged in Korea. And when I first arrived there, it was during when Chun Doo-hwan had just taken over power in a coup. In fact, there was a movie recently, 1212 a Day, on that. But anyway, there was then a transition. There was an election to, not a very fair election, but his crony, as it were, then took over, No Tae-woo. And then after that, we find ourselves progressively working into real democratic elections. But it was through a process that seemed to be not very fair for many years, as things I would not be surprised in some regard, however this turns out, that we won't have a perfect model at the beginning on all of this. The resistance as they, rise to take power. And of course, these are things that happen in Korea, right? I mean, the junta was stood down because the people rose up, and that is what brought this transition. The vote. Clearly, we're looking there. The hope for in Myanmar. Let me quickly end on this question. We'll go really quickly. The NUG's ability to govern. That's the question. Should the junta be overthrown? Does the NUG have the capability to lead Myanmar toward a stable and democratic future?
Right. Well, NUG faces a lot of challenges because many of the ministers, they haven't been able to meet with each other because they have to do it on the run, and many of them are in a very travel documents, so they're not all half legal, that type of situation. So, giving that challenges, they have been able to, move toward this level of success, right? But I think that we think we should be thinking more just not NUG alone. It'll be NUG plus.
That's right.
The many ethnic groups, right? They will come together as a collective leadership, collective group governance to lead this charge. It's almost like the 13 colonies,
Yes.
right, at the beginning of U.S. history.
Fairly messy.
Right, a little bit messy, yeah, but nevertheless, they had to work through it.
Work through it.
And then they will get to an agreement where everybody can agree on, right? But it may be 25-75 or whatever. I think it's important as they start dialoguing and they start negotiating and they start debating.
Yeah. Well said. Well, let's leave that there. As we close, maybe you would give us a book recommendation for the audience to explore Myanmar's complex landscape. What would you recommend?
Right. The latest book out is Sean Turnell's. He's Australian, and he was also advisor to Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, economic advisor to Daw Aung San Suu Kyi during her tenure, her administration. And he, of course, he was put in jail. And he spent over, nearly 2 years in jail. So he has a lot of insight from inside the jail and dealing with the Myanmar military. And also he has some insight into what Daw Aung San Suu Kyi was doing during those, her administration
And the
years.
title of the book?
It's called Unlikely Prisoner.
The
Yes.
Unlikely Prisoner.
Yes. So it's available on Amazon.
Thank you. Well, with that, today's discussion has been profoundly insightful. Thank you for joining us. I'm thrilled to announce our next episode on February 26th, titled Fishing for Security from Sea Slavery, featuring Miss Annie Barlow. In that episode, we'll delve into the critical issues of forced labor and illegal fishing practices, shedding light on a dark undercurrent affecting our oceans and the lives of those who navigate them. Make sure you don't miss this compelling conversation. Register now. I'm your host, James Minnick, bidding you farewell for now. Until we reconvene, aloha oi. As always, the opinions expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of DKI APCSS, the U.S. Department of Defense, or the U.S. government.